Is Western civilization in decline? I'm going to talk about this in this episode of Rising Nomad. I'm currently in Nottingham in the UK. It's July 2023, and this is one of the poorest cities in the UK, so maybe I'll be a little bit more pessimistic than usual about what's going on with Western civilization based on the surroundings of this video. I've chosen to live in Thailand, honestly, as my personal life decision. I lived before in Serbia, which is a place that, seemed to be on the up for a long time, getting better and stuff like that. And the reason I originally moved to Serbia is because I started to see a certain sort of decay in Western society, pretty much from, I'd say, when I turned about 18 years old. It was the year 2001. This sort of Twin Towers and all of that sort of stuff. I was a young, idealistic young man, and I started looking into, the grievances of the rest of the world versus the west of the world and all of that sort of stuff, and how the system is built on, brutal capitalism, and really didn't have what at that time to me seemed like humanity's best interests in mind. It was just a system, especially in North America, which previously for my parents' generation had built the most prosperity ever. But what came out of that prosperity and that capitalism that led to that prosperity was a certain sort of brutal, aggressive capitalism that's most epitomized by, let's say, the food and medical industries and legal industries in the United States, where people are just trying to make as much money as possible and don't care about who they trample on doing so. And it's a very dog-eat-dog sort of system. And this has kind of been the predominant mentality that's been at the helm of Western capitalism pretty much my whole life. And I've always been sort of looking for more nuanced perspectives, not like I'm some sort of anti-capitalist or pro-capitalist. I'm somebody who believes that capitalism needs to be embodied with the values of community, of empowerment, of possibility, of progress for humanity, and all this sort of stuff. I guess the topic of this video is all about Western civilization and why a lot of these countries are no longer great places to live, especially in the last couple of years, with all this sort of inflation that's hit and shrinking middle classes that's happened pretty much, I guess, since the year 2008 was when it really started economically to decline. And what's the future? Well, the future for me that I've obviously chosen as a remote worker, digital nomad, whatever you want to call me, is to take advantage of the remnants of whatever prosperity this society had and put down roots in different places physically with that money and sort of build something of an alternative to living in these societies, because it's getting hard out there. Now, I'm not saying that these are bad places to live. Personally, for me, England is the worst country I lived in for the sort of me personally enjoying my life here. It just, I lived here in 2012. It was an important stepping stone on my journey of defining what I didn't want and defining what I wanted. And, adamantly going on the path of living my best life, which has now evolved to living in Thailand, part of the year in Europe as well. Serbia is still a part of my life. And I've spent only a few days here since, let's say, the year 2017 was the last time I spent more than a week here. And it's always been, since the last 20 years, it's been more run down. But I don't know, what I consider the good life is, health and wellness, good food, being able to express yourself emotionally, have intriguing conversations, nice weather outside, being able to enjoy your life, and all that sort of stuff, and a sense of possibility, for what you can do. Now, this Anglo-Saxon civilization, similar to the one I grew up in Canada, has been very good at giving lots of people really good lives, especially, I mentioned America as a brutal capitalist place, but it's brought more opportunity to more people ever. And the spirit of the country has a very good side and a very dark side. The dark side is the stuff that I talked about. And the good side is the culture of entrepreneurialism, the culture of having a fair legal system where, corruption is sort of kept away from the common man. There's corruption at higher levels in these types of societies. There's corruption done at very, very high levels with legislation, lobbying, and all that sort of stuff. But the average man still has a chance to be an entrepreneur, to live the American dream, to all that sort of stuff. In Canada, in the UK. But what about all those other people who just want to grow up, get a job, and all that sort of stuff? What about all those people? What are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to live? What are they going to have for a future where inflation is driving the living costs up, where society is becoming increasingly fragmented ideologically and politically, where like the wealth gap between the ruling class and the ordinary people is getting worse. If you are that entrepreneurial person like me, who can sort of like find opportunity in any situation, and put together systems that will make people's lives better, yeah, you still have a chance here and pretty much anywhere in the world. But for the average people in this civilization, life is getting worse. And what are the symptoms of this? I mean, I'm talking about, the inflation's like really clear symptom, but also the obesity rates, It means that the food culture has been allowed to get so bad, and marketing has actually marketed people stuff that's so hazardous to them, their health, and now they're in a situation where basically they're not doing well, and the psychological isolation from this type of individualist culture is devastating in a lot of cases. The alienation seems to be a increasing force in the US, Canada, in the UK. People are being left behind. And I have lots of sympathy for that. And I think that is this civilization in decline? Yes. Is it still beautiful and great? The values that it's founded on and the prosperity it's created around the world? Yes. Do I want to live? I've lived in the UK, in Canada, in Serbia, and Thailand. Do I want to live in the English-speaking world anymore? I've spent time in the United States as well, so I know what's going on there. No, I don't want to, because it seems like things are just getting worse, and they might get a whole lot worse. Does this system, this culture, have what it takes to turn it around? We'll see. I mean, definitely the politically and in terms of freedom of expression, it's still a lot better in places like this than it is in a lot of the more authoritarian countries. If you're some sort of dissident. But that's largely because the mainstream media and culture creates so much noise that drowns out any dissenting voices, whereas, in other countries they actually have a chance of creating political instability. Here, in these countries, the power distribution is so locked that, you don't really have a chance to, speak up and make a difference. So, you might as well be able to say what you want. It's not like in other countries where, just take a look at what happens in other countries and governments that are repressive and directly jailing people for having opinions that are against them and stuff like that. So on that level, this place is still doing well, but I don't know. I think from the whole COVID era, we learned that things can change really quickly in terms of the freedoms that you're allowed. And, you know, I'm grateful for the chance to explore different civilizations. Right now, Thailand's where I want to live. That's where I feel the most freedom. Previously, Serbia was a place where I felt a lot of freedom, and still is. But the thing with Serbia ultimately became, I think, that I didn't have enough like-minded people there. And the overall tone of the society was dark, sarcastic, bitter, stuff like that. And started, as I learned more and more about it, more and more of the language, more and more of the culture, and the way people, you know, it just started being like, okay, I've learned as much as I can from this, let's move on. So the truth, as always, nomads, is somewhere in between. Somewhere between these Western countries are no longer good places to live and work. Well, they continue to be good places to work. The business culture is still fairer than a lot of places. You know, people will F you over a lot less in places like this than they would in, you know, those other big economies like China, different India, Russia. You know, definitely I can speak to the fact that you can trust that most entrepreneurs are honest in their intentions here and in the States and stuff like that. Just the main thing is, what happens to all those people who aren't so entrepreneurial? What happens to all those people who just want to have a nice life, as that's slipping away from them, as they're in a system that feeds them junk and then capitalizes when they get sick from eating that junk? You know, well, for the masses, things aren't looking good. So there's a individualist message is like, you know, like Nomad capitalist Andrew Henderson always says, go where you're treated best. I like his channel. I like that message. But then there's a collectivist thing, which is like, the message here is like, it's not looking good for these societies as a collective. I don't see a trajectory out of this. I see it getting more fragmented, more divided, more impoverished, more, yeah, it's in decline. What do you guys think? Do you think there's there's a future for the West, or is it time to start taking what's good from what you've learned from living here and move into different places like I do? You know, I'm not saying Thailand is perfect, it's far from perfect. I'm not saying Serbia is perfect, it's way, way, way far from perfect, but those are places where I found new ways of looking at the world and interacting with my fellow human beings that led to a certain amount of inspiration. So wherever you found your inspiration, let me know in the comments. And thanks for watching this video. And I'll see you somewhere else soon.